Today, we'll learn about how our European ancestors got here. Let's follow an Ellis Island immigrant on a typical journey about 1900. The trip starts once you decide to leave. You save money or sell goods to buy the passage, about $30, which would be the equivalent of $1,000 today, plus an extra $30 or $1,000 for travel expenses. Many immigrants traveled on prepaid tickets sent by relatives already in America. Others bought tickets from traveling salesmen. Then you must apply to leave your own country with legal documents and permits, such as an application package for permission to emigrate, which includes letter of manumission, which is proof of freedom from obligations, for example, to your Scottish laird or your German baron, proof of sale of your property, letters of reference from church or influential citizens to prove that you had no strings or encumbrances left behind. Your town officials might ask you for proof that your bills have been paid, all your legal obligations have been met, and that local authorities agree with the departure. You might even have to pay them a kickback or risk having your assets confiscated, like if your family runs a farm, a necessity to the area. Some towns required that you leave behind all your tools of the trade, plus at least 2 male family members of prime working age to continue to produce. If you fail to do it, you risk losing the entire farm and face imprisonment of your entire family. Once you have the permits, you show them to any authority who requests it: a civil registrar, the local police, the port authority with jurisdiction over your ship, or agents from the ship prior to boarding, like this. You can see his name is Karl Schnell, the purser of the Kaiser Wilhelm II. Schnell, do you know what that means in German? Hurry up! I have a feeling he says Schnell a lot. Mach Schnell. Very fast. Once you book passage, get clearance from local authorities, and get a quick check by a doctor, you can travel to the port to board the ship. My Norwegian ancestors in 1840 traveled from Gothenburg in Sweden, as we saw, but the most popular ports from Northern Europe were Liverpool in England, near where the Beatles were from, Le Havre in France, Hamburg and Bremen in Germany, although many of those lists were destroyed, Antwerp in Belgium, which replaced Rotterdam as the center of the safari universe, and in Southern Europe, Naples in Italy. So how did they get to port? Even by the 1840s, when the first steamships came into use, most Europeans had never been 10 miles from home, much less to a big city port like Liverpool or Hamburg. Fewer still had ever been to sea. As travelers, they were often poor, frightened, and poorly educated. Northern Europeans used river or canal boats to get to port. They only traveled during the day, necessitating renting a room every night. If the boats were hampered by cattle, the cows were given the right of way. It's a cow. European railroads followed those in England starting by the 1840s. They were more expensive than boats, but more popular as the trip was shorter with fewer overall travel expenses. Without reliable public transportation and a lot of snow, except for the first-class Orient Express, Eastern Europeans might have had to walk for miles carrying their possessions with them. Italians might know someone. Uncle Luigi. Love the cart. Unfortunately, immigrants were defrauded from the moment they left home. Ship brokers, agents, and recruiters sold space on the ship for commission, but they connived to get more. Sometimes they chartered the whole ship, overbooking it. They might sell tickets for dates the ship did not sail. Sometimes they didn't even have a ship at all. Even reputable ticket brokers would sell and resell the same space, sometimes to the same people. People who sold supplies would overcharge for bad food and drink. They would sell beds for the layover, which were literally just boards to sleep in. They called these coffin beds. I wonder why. Or worse, a rope to hang over. They're asleep on a rope. Governments tried but failed to fully regulate the industry. But after all, these people were leaving. Why do we care? When boarding the ship, all passengers were asked specific questions that would appear on the passenger list or manifest. If their names were changed, they were changed by the immigrant at boarding at this point. For example, in this church record that shows their intention to leave, my family for the last time used Yvonne's patronymic name, which means that it was his first name that changed with every generation for each family member. Before arriving, they unified and took the name of their farm, Hegg. By the 1850s, there was no more waiting for the wind. Steamships were becoming more available and were making the voyage faster and cheaper. The first wooden-hulled, paddle-propelled steamships could deliver 200 passengers from Liverpool to New York in just 2 weeks. By the 1860s, iron-hulled, screw-driven steamships could deliver 1,500 passengers in just 9 days. But there was one problem faster ships couldn't overcome: seasickness. Like my mother in the 1950s, who couldn't keep food down on the voyage across the Pacific, traveling on this ship to join my father in Japan. Many immigrating ancestors, like the first Germans, had the same motion sickness, but little access to a steward who insisted she take the broth, which kept my mother alive, so she could have me, or Dramamine, which has allowed me to cruise 30 times to Cuba with my son here. The overcrowded ships provided little time above decks in the fresh air. You can imagine the poor sanitation facilities, little more than a bucket. The required doctor was often a drunk. Those in steerage were required to cook their own meals. Those who could afford to would often bring extra jam, sugar, biscuits, hard cheese, dried ham, and even eggs, hard-boiled or pickled. But they did have time for fun on the deck. But the day before arrival, many passengers, not the crew, would have to scrub the boat clean so the port inspection would be favorable. Finally, they reach America. While the immigrants celebrate, health officers board the ship in the harbor looking for signs of disease. When the ship passes inspection, while on the ship, officials do the required health check of returning citizens, plus first and second class passengers. These lucky few are processed quickly and can leave the ship by tender. The 75% of the passengers that are third class, also called steerage, often have to wait for hours or even days until a small ferry boat takes them to Ellis Island for immigration processing. The crew gives the officials from Ellis Island a manifest or list of the passengers aboard. These immigrants are arriving at Ellis Island in 1906. Officials have already been aboard starting their inspections. This uniformed officer has a ship's manifest under his arm. Do you see that? It's a great big piece of paper. They give each immigrant a numbered inspection card as they walk to the main building. The name and number matches the ship's manifest. This is the only paperwork required by immigrants to enter the United States. Regardless of the turmoil, they are happy. Like my Norwegians, upon arrival, many immigrants do not speak English. The commotion is overwhelming, struggling with trunks, suitcases, cloth sacks with pickled eggs, and small children. They follow each other to the imposing red brick building. Wearing their numbered tags, the immigrants enter the baggage room on the building's ground floor, where they can leave their belongings until their inspection is done. The process will run from 3 to 5 hours. So they were often provided free food. The dining room could feed old country favorites to 1,000 people at a time. Beef stew, potatoes, bread, pickled herring, baked beans, stewed prunes, plus new foods like sandwiches and ice cream. Mama, was ist los ice cream? Bitte more. Next, they go upstairs to have a medical inspection. However, the process begins on the staircase as doctors stand above, watching for anyone who has trouble walking or breathing or other signs of health problems. They are checked for obvious disease, such as goiter or lameness, which would have kept me out. Next, they go for processing to the registry room or Great Hall. They wait their turn for an immigration official. One by one, the passengers are called to speak with a uniformed inspector to show their numbered identity tag and answer 29 questions, such as, where were you born? Have you ever been convicted of a crime? How much money do you have? What is your destination? Interpreters like Fiorello LaGuardia, he was an interpreter at Ellis Island, who translated 4 languages, are available to help. An immigrant might be detained for further questioning if their answers are different from those on the manifest. What do you suppose her discrepancy is? I was looking at this picture for a long time trying to figure it out. And I think she has four cards in front of her, but she has five kids behind the official. So I think they're missing somebody. Once processing is done, they can leave the Great Hall via the staircase of separation. Those who are going north to New York City, those traveling west or south, the 20% being detained for weeks or even months, half due to health, like contagious disease or pregnancy. 350 babies are born on Ellis Island, and half we detained for legal reasons. Detained aliens have additional records showing reasons for the detention, like hospitalization, a young single woman traveling alone, oh, no, 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 waiting for someone to meet them who haven't arrived yet, no ticket to the next destination, like Ivan Radovich, who has a ticket for Wyoming but wants to go to Alaska. He should have told them, I just want to go to Wyoming. 2% will be returned to their original country like felons, ineligible for citizenship. Stowaways are encouraged to become sailors. Here is a crew list from the Maple Branch of Quebec. None were recent stowaways based on their years of service, but they could be an ancestor, like John Kopic, a 31-year-old English second mate with a scar on his eyebrow. Lots of details in these records. Those who successfully complete the processing may exchange their money for US dollars, purchase train or riverboat tickets to their final destination, then leave for the ferry to freedom, like William Wallace. Freedom! But as we all know, this is only the first step in their creating their new life. The new arrivals again have to run the gauntlet of thieves and scammers like in the port of departure. For example, they offer to take your bags to a boarding house and simply take your bags. Or sell you tickets for passage on a canal boat or lake steamer, which turn out to be fake. That doesn't happen today, does it?